Good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and we are back here in the Bat Cave today. I do have a handful of questions that were submitted earlier that we're going to cover today, and of course, you can feel free to leave any questions or comments in the chat while we're here today live. There's still a ton of stuff going on this week. A lot of which I will cover in next week's main episode. The post office announced their proposed pricing for the first half of next year. It's the first batch of that. Did not include any media mail pricing that I saw, but it did include some increases in Ground Advantage. So we'll be covering that on next Monday's episode, along with whatever else happens to be going on with the various platforms, which is always a bunch of drama. It has been a mess. So with that, let's say some good mornings. Miss Lachey, I know you said hello, but for some reason your messages dropped out of the chat. So good morning, Miss Lachey. And thank you for the note about hitting the thumbs up and subscribing, which I'm always bad about asking about. We've got Lord Jake Ryan in the house this morning. Good morning. Mel Flips It. Hello. Den Decor Depot, welcome. Thanks for coming out. Black Cat Flips. Hello. Thank you. Big Dre, good morning to everyone. JRKR 1964, it's been a while since I saw you. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. Listing while listening. That's what I'm gonna be talking while listening, which isn't quite the same thing, but it's close. Ground Advantage has already gone too high. Yes. Although, to be fair, in some cases, it's already still cheaper than media mail, which has really gone too high, which is why I'm at least partially hopeful that they'll skip an increase in January for media mail. Knock wood, I'm not super confident of that, but shipping has just gotten out of sight. I've talked about it on this show going back a couple of years when they introduced the twice-a-year price increases. It's why I went away from the free shipping model to customer-paid shipping. I know all these sites continue to talk about free shipping being the way to go. And I was on the eBay, whatever it was, the winter seller check-in the other day. And one of the things that they said in this thing was that they found that millennials will pay more for an item if it has free shipping. And my thought was, well, why not just charge them the shipping then? If they're already willing to pay more, what's the difference if it's transparent or opaque? Who's paying for the shipping? Just put it out there. Hey, this is what it costs to ship. This is what you're going to pay for the item. You can let me know what you think of that. My sales, when I changed, I didn't notice any drop off when I went to customer paid shipping. Again, I price my items so that they're competitive with the shipping added in. So if the book is the lowest price for a similar condition, let's just say is $19.99 with free shipping, I will price mine, whatever, $13.99, $14.99 plus shipping to be in that kind of same range. And then I just let it ride from there. So you can let me know in the chat what you do with shipping. But yeah, shipping costs are, between that and fees, it's getting really hard to make a living doing this. Miss Lachey, there you go. Thank you again. Be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Memberships are also available. There are a couple of members-only videos out there that will go live for everyone sometime in December. YouTube, to full disclosure, was running a little promotion to pay creators to do some members-only videos. So I wanted to go ahead and take advantage of that and run in that program. So those videos will be coming, but memberships are available. I think it's $4.99 a month. You get early access to the main podcast. You get priority response to questions. I've done like consultations for members. So if you're interested in that, that is available. Please feel free to join. I would appreciate it. Operating on eBay, good morning from Central Kentucky. Welcome. Lindy Moo, hello, good morning. I buy WNY with free returns. Free shipping makes no sense because you can't withhold the original shipping charge. Yep, absolutely. And Fern Flips, a good morning. So I'm actually armed today with two phones. This is the old phone that I now just use for listing. It's only connected via Wi-Fi. So when we get into the listing portion of that, this is the phone I'll be on. But I did finally upgrade. That one was, gosh, 4 or 5 years old, and got its last update and was starting to run a little rough. So I did splurge on a new phone. So I do have some questions on my main phone from Mel. She asks, how do you list books that appear to be signed by an author, illustrator, etc.? So I will generally just put that it's signed, and then in the description, I will note that I'm not the original owner and it appears to be signed, but I don't have any way to verify the signature. And then I always take a photo of the photographs. Another of her questions a little later on is what all are the photos I take? So we'll do a live listing as we usually do, and I'll kind of walk through that process. But I'll go ahead and indicate that it's signed, and that autograph or signature or inscription, if it's a gift inscription from the actual writer, is authentic to the point that I can verify it. If it's a particularly famous author or work, I may go online and do like a Google search to find other examples of the signature to see if I can match it up. But I really don't have any way to fully authenticate it. So I will indicate that I believe it's signed, but I won't get too carried away with that. So I hope that helps. Why don't I list on Amazon, and kind of what's my thought process on that? So I've talked a lot about Amazon, and obviously there are sellers on Amazon that's all they do, and they're doing super, super well. Amazon is a terrific opportunity if you're a book and media seller and you can get ungated to sell those things. Amazon is terrific. I sold on Amazon when I had my record store back in the early to mid 2000 teens and did quite well there. But over the time I was on there and in the interim since then, it's gotten much more expensive to sell over there. They've become much more restrictive about who and what they will allow people to sell with the gating of various product categories. And it's just become a lot more difficult to sell there. And again, there's no right answer to this, but for my business, I made the decision that, yes, I know I'm leaving some money on the table, but on the flip side, there's always costs, and the cost to my workflow and to my kind of mental health with having to deal with all the extra stuff to also sell on Amazon. For me, it's not outweighed by the extra money I could make over there. I've talked about that quite a bit. I'm not doing this to quote unquote get rich. I want to make a nice living. I want to be able to do this full time for a living, but there's a limit to how much stress and how much work I think I want to do, and Amazon right now is just a bridge too far for me. I had mentioned previously I used List Perfectly for my cross listing. They do not offer Amazon as one of the accounts that you can link to. If they ever did that in the future, that might ease my workflow enough to make it workable for me to at least consider for some items. I probably would not list everything there. So I haven't like completely ruled it out. But in the current phase of my business, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze for me. I know I'm leaving money on the table. There are Amazon sellers that say if you're only selling books on eBay, you're doing it wrong and you're missing out. I won't go quite that far. My business is quite good. I have no complaints. Could I do more if I was on Amazon? Absolutely. Am I willing to deal with the psychic, the physical and the emotional costs of doing so? I'm not. And that's why I've chosen not to sell over there. So let me hop back into the chat real quick before we continue with her questions. JRKR says, have always had free shipping on media, but considering starting to charge shipping. Yeah. With media rates going up twice a year, which has been the case now for 3+ years, when I started selling, I think it was $2.75 up to £1. It might have been 3.25, but it was right in that range. Now it's $4.63. If it goes up again, it's probably going to be really close to $5 to ship 1 pound. That's a huge swing. That's almost double what it would have been. And if you're selling in that, $9.99 category of media, and you did that when it was less than $3 to ship, you could still make some pretty good money. But now you're going to have almost $5 tied up in shipping. The math becomes a lot more difficult. So that's why I made the switch, and why I think a lot of sellers are considering the same. Miss Lachey says, Mel, I do the same as Ryan. I Google to see examples of the signature, put signed copy in the title and the description, prominent picture of the signature. Be aware some signatures are auto signatures. And there is also, especially with some like kind of newer books, sometimes if the author did a signing for the publisher, the book may even have a sticker on the dust jacket that says signed copy. And that one obviously is really easy to verify because the publisher has said it was signed by the author. So there are ways to at least quasi-verify what the signature is. I'm always a little hesitant because it wasn't my book. I didn't see the person sign it. So I try to be a little cautious, but I want to disclose at least and let the buyer make the decision. I think that signature is authentic or not. And to be fair, I don't jack up the price extraordinarily because of a signature. I may price it a little bit more than one in similar condition that is not signed, but for most of the books that I'm getting, the author's signature is not going to double the value of the book, in my opinion. So that's something else to kind of keep in mind. Big Dre says, I was going to sell on Amazon, but I found you need to pay about $200 to sell there when you include the programs that make it easier to list and delist items, as well as the $40 a month to Amazon. Right. So to have a pro seller account, it's $39.99 a month, which, to be fair, I think that's the same price it's been since I was doing it back in the early 2000s. So it's not been a bunch of price increases. That's something else I'll be talking about in Monday's show. Amazon did just make an announcement that they feel they may have gone too far with their last fee increases to FBA sellers. So there will be no fee increases coming up at the first of the year. So that's good news. We'll have more details on that in next week's episode. So you want to be sure to tune in for that shameless plug. But yeah, to be able to do it effectively, I paid for software back when I was doing it originally. Again, $30, $40 a month, which is roughly what I pay for List Perfectly. But I'm not willing to pay that for yet another program to help like monitor all the pricing, because getting the buy box on Amazon obviously is super important. So you want to be constantly reevaluating the market, and there's a lot of extra expense on top of the expenses that you already have with Amazon, with the fees and so on. So again, I think a lot of us have just decided that it doesn't make sense for our businesses. Mel says, I've been putting signed signature not authenticated in the description, but was unsure of putting it in title. I don't believe an unauthenticated signature adds extra value. Yeah, totally agree. Christine Talona, good morning. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. Den de Cordibo says, eBay has gone full pay to play. I went with dynamic promoted, uncapped, and sales exploded last week. So there you go. What have you noticed what kind of percentage your dynamic percent has been? Mine is capped at 7, so that's all I'm seeing. My sales have been super consistent over there, except for that 1 week where, for whatever reason, it was a big fall off. But yeah, I'd be curious what percentage you're seeing on most of your sales without a cap. Miss Lachey says, I found a fair number of signed copies lately. Yep, there's a lot of them out there, but I don't think I have any that I know of in this tub, but we'll see. Going back to Mel's questions, talk about lots, and if you do them, how do you photo them? When would you do lots? So when I first started, I did lots all the time. So if I got, say, 2 books about presidents or World War II or whatever, but they were super, super cheap, like $4 or $5 free shipping kind of comps that weren't worth listing individually, I might take a couple of those and try to sell them in a lot, $5.99 plus shipping, which would put me in the range of each of those books individually. But as I've gotten more opportunities to source and a lot more inventory, I've really gotten away from doing that because it's just so low value. a book, an individual book that's going to bring $10 with shipping, I'm all about. 2 books at that price, I'm not quite so sure, given that I've got thousands of pieces of inventory still to work through. So I've kind of stopped doing a lot, no pun intended, of lots. One exception to that is that I have started doing lots. So, I've started selling on Whatnot, and kind of my process initially was to cull some old inventory from my science fiction listings, stuff that was currently on sale, that I'd had for a long time. And I've taken those over to Whatnot and I'm selling them for dollar starts, just trying to move through some of that older inventory, which has worked pretty well. But typically at the end of the show, I'll have 4, 5, 6 maybe left over, and I'll just take those and put them into a lot and sell them. So I've got one here actually from the last couple of science fiction shows that did not sell, that I was gonna do a lot with. So we'll just do that today so you can kind of see what the process is in terms of the pictures and the whole 9 yards. So I have got 6 fantasy paperbacks, 2 of which are by the same pair of authors. But these 6 I did over the course of 2 Whatnot shows. These were ones that did not sell, so I'm going to do a lot of these. I'm going to sell these for essentially $1.50 a piece, so 3, 6, 9. I'm going to list this for $8.99 plus shipping, with a best acceptable offer of like $6, and see if I can't just blow these things out of here. So I won't take a ton of individual pictures on these, like I do with my normal process where every book gets maybe 10, 12, 15 photos. I'm not going to go through all that for a $9 lot. Come on, eBay. Just see if there's anything here I can use. Probably will not be. We'll just continue without match. These are mixed condition. I've got a couple that I would say are very good and a couple that are probably fair. So I'm going to call this lot acceptable. And then in the description, I'll say condition ranges from very good to acceptable. eBay is struggling today. Is really struggling. Let's see if it saved that as a draft. Nope. Try this again. Wonder if eBay, there we go. All right, so for photos, I'm going to do one group photo of the fronts. I'm going to flip them over. I'm going to do a group photo of the backs. I'm going to then do a group photo of just the spines so that they can see the titles again, and to see that wear on those. And then I'm just going to take pictures of the individual covers and then one picture of the inside, just to get an example of whatever tanning you might have on the pages. And that's essentially what I would do for the photos, although I think I missed a couple of the insides there, but let's go back and do those real quick. is actually that one. For the title, fantasy paperback, lot of 6. And then I'll put in a couple of the authors' last names for people who might be searching. And that is essentially what I will do for that. Man, look at the eBay. Errors and slow loading and seeing that it didn't save anything I put in there. eBay, what are you doing? Try this again. For the author, I'm just going to select mix authors because it's a lot. There is not one. For book title, I'm just going to leave it fantasy. These are English. There are a bunch of ISBNs, but I'm not going to use them for reasons we have discussed previously. I'm going to leave publisher blank because there's multiple publishers. I can't put in a publication year because, again, they vary. These are novels. They are fiction. They're not all vintage, so I'm going to leave that blank. Put in my SKU. Again, the condition ranges from acceptable to very good. Shipped with USPS Media Mail. $8.99. I will take as low as $6 because they were $1 starts on Whatnot. So if I could get $6 out of them, that would be what they would have sold for probably over there. I need my weight. Those will go in a box, so it's going to be about 3 pounds. And that is that. So that is essentially what I would do with a lot. Again, I'm not doing a bunch of them these days, but as I get stuff that hasn't sold over on Whatnot, I will probably do some really cheap lots to try to blow these out. I have sold a few of those already. I've done a couple of science fiction lots that have done pretty well, so I'm going to continue that process and see how that goes. Let me get back up in here. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat that I have missed. So averages 10 to 12% on the no cap dynamic. Highest was 18, lowest was 5. So there you go. So 10 to 12. I'm capped at 7, so maybe going to 10 might be helpful. You may recall I did 8 a while ago and didn't really see much of an increase. eBay is consistently recommending that I bump back up to 8 because, of course, they are. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure, but that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's good information for everybody. JRKR says started dynamic also, but capped at 12. Can't afford to not put a cap. How many are you seeing that are going for that full 12? I'd just be curious. Again, because mine is at 7 and almost everything's going at the max at 7. Still keeping roughly 60 cents of every dollar coming in, so I guess we're okay. Yeah, because that puts you at, if it's averaging 10, your average fees, if it's a media, are probably in the 23 to 25% range, which is still a big chunk. But if you're buying right, there's still some pretty good meat on the bone. So that's not, of course, we'd all rather not have to pay that than to have to do it. But at some point, it does turn into a question of whether you're willing to pay the fees to make the sales and take a little bit less per item to generate more total revenue. That's always the question. A lot of people get caught up in like gross margin percentages. They want to make whatever, 60%, 80%, 90%, but you lose the forest for the trees because your sales are lower. So net, you're not putting as much money in your bank. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. If I make 50% versus 60%, but I put an extra $1,000 a month in the bank, is that a deal I would take, even though I'm giving eBay more money? Absolutely. Let's see here. Juan at Nose Attic, hello, welcome. It's the fee versus price. People don't like high prices, but they hate additional fees. The extra mental effort to figure out what the better price is makes for a dispositive experience. I assume you're talking about like adding the shipping cost in. And, you know, Mercari is trying that experiment as well, where they were disclosing the fee separately, and then they ran a beta where they baked the fee into the price to see how that worked. I've not seen any feedback on that and how that's gone. I think sellers just want, or buyers rather, just want the lowest price they can find. Free shipping is always better than not. Mercari is struggling because of their, I guess, to be fair, because of the transparency of all their fees. You got a $50 item that has maybe $6 or $8 of shipping, and then 10 to 15% in fees. It gets to be a lot of extra, and I'm continuing to see posts on my old video about that, where people are commenting that I went to buy something and the price of the item almost doubled, and I just walked away. Big Dre says, yep, if you can afford dynamic, no cap is the way to go as a part-time reseller. The decision was easy for me. Swamp Picker says, hello. Miss Lachey says, generally get more value from signed books, especially when the signature is well documented, unless it's a random cookbook or modern fiction, right? And I'm really upfront. I talk about like my networking with estate sellers and that, and I will tell them if it's an estate with mostly contemporary fiction, and cookbooks, I'm probably not interested because I've already got more of that than I know what to do with, and a lot of it's low value. If it's vintage and antique books, I'm your guy. Another hello. Do okay with children's book slots. That would be good. Again, I've got a Whatnot show tonight of some old vintage children's books, so we'll see how that goes and then what we end up doing with those when we're done. My sales haven't taken off with dynamic with a cap, and you're at 12%. So your cap is already where he is on average, and you haven't seen a big increase. So that's really interesting. I'm on the fence on this no cap. I might have to try an experiment and just see. Consignment wares, why would you use a fund to list items when desktop listing software has been the fastest method since 1998? I have not found that personally to be the case because of my workflow here at my workstation. I've got my items to list here. I've got my photo booth here, and I've got my inventory box that's going to the warehouse here. So I can very easily grab an item, research it, take the photos, complete the listing, put it in its storage box, and move on to the next, rather than doing a multi-step process where maybe I do research and then I set those aside and then I come back to them later and I do photos, and then later I go to my PC and I do the listing, and then I have to put it in the box. So for my workflow, this has been a much, much faster process for me personally. I know a bunch of sellers who swear by desktop and that's the only way they list. It goes back to what I say all the time on this show. There are a million ways to do this. The system that works best for you is the one to use. For me, doing this on mobile is far and away faster than doing it part with photos and part with desktop. So everybody's experience and everybody's workflow is different, but I appreciate the comment. If you use phone or Seller Hub, you have no backups for your listings. Not sure what you mean by no backups for listings, unless you're talking about the photos. My photo app would store all the photos, but I delete them every week because they clog up the memory anyway. But yeah, clarify that if you would. Watching you list a lot is so very helpful. Do you not include photos of the title pages or copyright pages? I do that with individual books, but again, not with a lot of books that I expect to sell for $1 a piece. Again, that's just a personal decision. It's a few extra steps in that flow that I don't think will make that big of a difference on a $9 lot of 6 paperbacks. But I'm going to do another individual book, and I'll show you I do take pictures of all of that on an individual item. Mel flips it, just starting to think I will keep doing lots because some books I have to pick up are low value. At least I have to decide whether to do single or lots now. And that's always been like the breaking point for me as I go through this tub and I come across a book I've got a couple that I did earlier. These are selling for $5 and $6 free shipping. I can't make that math work. So these are going into a pile. I will then make a decision. Do I want to try these over on Whatnot for $1 plus shipping at auction? Do I want to make a lot, or do I just want to donate these and get on to more productive stuff? That's kind of the decision points. Like I said, I've kind of gotten out of doing the lots, other than that one use case, at least for now. Drafts saved are available in Seller Hub and mobile. And I don't save drafts. I do a listing and then get on to the next. I know a lot of people talk about like listings disappearing and not being available. I keep really close watch on the number of active listings I have versus what I expect to have kind of on a daily basis. I know I start my day with X number, I list X number, and I sell Y number, and I know where I should be. And I've not had any issues with like listings disappearing or with ghost listings coming back on that were sold previously. I know a lot of sellers have those issues, and having those backups would probably be helpful then, but it's just not something I've come across. Sold a lot of books a few days ago on Poshmark. That's interesting. Again, that's not a site I would have ever considered for books, but there you go. Listings on eBay are only stored for a limited time and then deleted. eBay also deletes listings due to glitches. Again, as I just said, I've been doing this full time for 5 years. Have not had that happen to me a single time. Everybody's use case varies. Everybody has their own experience. I've just literally never had that happen. Knock wood, it'll probably happen tonight, but yeah, I've got listings. I don't know what you mean by they're only stored for a limited time and then deleted, because I literally have listings that have been up for 5 years, that are still active, that are still shoppable, they're still searchable. When I run my promotions every month, they're still all there. So I don't know what you're referring to there. You may be having an experience. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, how different users all using the same platform have completely different experiences. They may see completely different screens or different information because eBay rolls out these things in waves, or they'll test the thing with some sellers and not with others. So it's really difficult to say what's going on. But again, in my personal experience, that is just not something that's happened to me. You have to wait for images to upload using the app or Seller Hub. I don't, as I just drag them in the garage sale and they're automatically uploaded to eBay later while I do other work. Again, as you just saw in that listing, those photos all went to that listing within 2 or 3 seconds. It was, I don't know, 8 or 10 photos that were instantly on that listing. When I completed the listing, the photos were all there. So I don't know what lag you're talking about waiting. I'm, again, personally not experiencing that with the app. Mel says, Auto Posher Cross Lister. It keeps backups of my listing, including sold and deactivated. I know a lot of the cross-listing software, Vendoo and List Perfectly, do similar things as well. Den Decor says 75 days on drafts. That's plenty of time. And again, I don't save drafts. I do live listing. So what you just saw there went from stack of stuff to photos to create the listing to finish the listing to the inventory box. It's done. There's no draft. I'm not saving anything. Start to finish in whatever that took with the glitches on eBay, not saving it immediately. 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and that listing was finished. So I almost never do drafts. I do my tub, my photos, my listing, go live with the listing and move on to the next. And I will do anywhere from 20 to 50 a day, depending on what I'm working on. And those listings are all done, complete, live, and then I'll go to List Perfectly and cross list to Mercari and to Etsy and get all that done in one day without drafts. Consignment Wares says Autoposher store listing on their servers. Do they not? I don't use it, but I believe that is correct. Garage Sale stores your data on your computer for as long as you like, not on someone else's servers. So there you go. That's one advantage. Again, if your experience is like mine, where you're not losing listings, it probably isn't a deal breaker. But I can use AppleScript or JavaScript in Garage Sale to automate tasks such as automatically filling out item specifics. So you've got obviously a workflow that works for you very well, and that's the name of the game. Yeah, I beg to disagree. But again, that goes back to everybody has their own experience and their own way to run their businesses, from pricing to the types of items they carry to the types of platforms they sell on, like my choice not to sell on Amazon. You can do whatever you want. It's your business. You have found a workflow that works perfectly well for you, and that's the name of the game. Once you've found something that is comfortable and efficient and achieves the net result of getting your items listed, you're golden. JRKR says she does all listings with her phone. Again, completely. I've got listings literally that I did in August of 2019 that are still live with no problems. All the photos, all the item descriptions, everything is in there. So I don't know what to say to that. Ms. Lachey says, understandable, so many great listing software programs out there, various processes and systems people use, who works for them, right? You see that all the time. People talk about Vendoo versus List Perfectly versus Autoposher versus a lot of these smaller ones. And most people are super passionate about the one or the system that works for them. And obviously the reason is because they finally found something that worked for them and was efficient. You know, like what Consignment Wares is talking about. He's having a problem, obviously, or she, with listings disappearing, and feels it's very important to have backups on their own computer so that if there is an issue down the road, they can go back and fix it. That is a perfectly understandable thing to feel and an acceptable practice to participate in. If you as a seller have not experienced that same glitch or same issue, there's probably no need for you, or at least in your head, no need to consider having a backup. Again, in my case, I can go back and find listings from clear back in 2019. I can remember sitting at my desk, my computer desk, and you can look at those old listings and you still see the wood of the computer desk in those photos. So I know they're still there. So again, everybody's experience is a little bit different. Hollywood Reseller says listings disappearing is a real issue. And again, I know people have commented about that in the past. My personal experience has been that I have not experienced that. How do you ship CDs? I went from using bubble mailers to putting bubble wrap around it and put it in a poly mailer. Seems to protect the case better. I've seen people that do both. I'm still using bubble mailers, but I will also put in, I use the size 0. So I put in a cardboard insert that's the size of the jewel case on one side, and then the when that CD is in that, that allows me to fold over the bubble mailer so that one side has one layer of bubble and the cardboard, and the other side essentially has 2 layers of bubble. I've not had anything damaged in several years. So again, different ways to skin a cat. I've seen booksellers that do the same thing, that they wrap in bubble wrap and then send in regular poly mailers. I do everything in bubble mailers. It's just a difference of how you want to do it. I think the net result is probably the same, but it's a choice. Some people think one is cheaper. Some people think one is quicker than the other. Again, it goes all to your personal experience with the post office. Hollywood Reseller said, had an item sell on eBay at auction. Buyer never paid, so I waited to see what would happen. eBay disappeared that listing. So I don't know that they automatically relist unpaid items. I'd have to go back and look. Like, I had a cancellation last night, and as part of the cancellation flow, eBay asked me if I wanted to relist it for free. I, of course, said yes, but I don't know what would have happened to that listing if I had said no. I assume it would have just disappeared. But I don't do many auctions, and I haven't had any unpaid auctions, so I don't have any experience with that either. Playroom says, I had a horrible wait time for pictures to load on Wi-Fi. Once I turned off my Wi-Fi and just on my 5G, my photos load instantly. I'm on Wi-Fi here, and as you saw there, it was fairly quick, couple seconds to upload 8 or 10 photos. Mel Flips It says, only had 5 listings disappear in maybe 2 years, but none since using Autoposher, but I expect things to glitch. No program is perfect. Absolutely true. Unsold listings are stored on eBay for 90 days, after which they are deleted. In order to keep them active, you need to relist them. I have everything set up on good till canceled. Those listings do not delist. It just every 30 days or every, depending on what the calendar looks like, 31 days, all of those buy it now listings automatically relist. The only things that go into unsold listings are the things that I manually delete, which is usually because they've sold on other platforms. Auctions obviously would be something totally different. If you're doing auctions and they don't sell, you would need to take some kind of action with those. But with the way eBay is currently set up with Buy It Now, those listings automatically renew every roughly 30 days. And again, have done so going back 5+ years for me. Mel Flips It says, I sell similar relist before that listing is 30 days old. Autoposh relists automatically, but sometimes I do sooner. What does everyone else do? I don't actually do any delist, relist, delist, sell similar. I've got 2,500 books in my garage to be listed. Working with existing listings that are still consistently selling on a regular basis is just not something that I've chosen to do. Again, everybody's business is different. Bird Knows Best just got here. Did you discuss the UPS rate changes? I mentioned that they're coming and that I'm going to cover them in next week's episode. This show tends to not be so much about the news very often, but I did say they announced those price increases. They are going into effect, if I remember right, January 19th. Of course, pending the approval of the Board of Governors, but that's essentially a rubber stamp. They almost always approve that. So a couple people had asked about, again, the photos that I take of a particular individual book. So let's do one here. This is, I haven't researched this yet, so I don't know if I'm going to list it, but The Way of All Flesh. This is Illustrated Editions Company book. I had a whole bunch of these as part of that big 1,800 book lot that I just bought. Most of the ones I've already done have been worth about 15 bucks. I assume this is probably going to be about the same. Again, it's got illustrations. These are from the 1930s. So let's just see what we've got here. So there's nothing showing. Let's try it without the S. Nothing. I'm going to go to Antiquarian and Collectible because this is an older book. Just kind of scroll through here and see if I see one like this. And there is one. This guy's selling it for $3.99. So we may not be doing this one. Let's look at solds just for fun. Don't see one like that. There's one for $4. Trying to get to 15 probably doesn't make sense. This will end up in a whatnot auction. Let's see what we've got here. This is published by Caxton House. No date. I don't see one exactly like this, but there's a lot of $9.99 to $14.99. So let's do... We'll use that as our starting place. I'm going to do just $9.99 on this one. So this particular one, there's nothing on the front cover. That's normally where I would start the photos, but when they're like that, I will usually start with the spine instead. And again, I'm going to do the spine, the front, I do the bottom, the side. I know a lot of people will do that kind of at this angle rather than like straight on. I've found either to be effective. I'll take a picture of the back. I always look on the board and the front end paper. Is there any writing? Is there any damage? Is there a book plate? In this case, there is. If there's not, I probably wouldn't take a picture, but because there is, I'll take a photo. I'll take a picture of the title page. This one does not have any copyright information. If it did, I would take a picture of that. And then I'll just take a few pictures of example pages so that the potential buyer knows kind of what this book looks like on the inside. Again, if there's any writing or any notes or any splitting on the back board, I would take a picture of that. In this case, there's not, so I'm not going to worry about that. And again, you can see those loaded in less than 5 seconds. Oops. Now, Caxton Press is in there, but this is actually says Caxton House. So I'm going to type in a custom value for that because it's not exactly what they have in their file. There is no date, so I can't put in a date. I'm going to call this acceptable. Some shelfware and fading on the cover. Light tanning of pages as shown. Shipped with USPS Media Mail. There was nothing else wrong with this. There's no splitting, there's no staining, there's no writing that I saw. If that were the case, I would have tried to take photos of those and also put them in the description. I'm going to do $9.99 and $7 because I am not married to this book. If somebody offered me $7, I would absolutely take it. And again, as part of my workflow, I've got my scale here, so I know exactly what this weighs. I can put in the dimensions. With books, it's probably not that big a deal because you're not going to get into generally like oversized shipping. But this way, I've got everything right. If this happens to sell through the international shipping program, I'm not going to get a charge back because I had the wrong weight in or anything like that. I put in exactly what it is going to be. And done. And again, that's kind of the process that I will do 20, 30, 50 times a day, depending on what it is that I'm working on. So hopefully that answers your question, Mel, about the photos again. All sides of the exterior, anywhere where there's markings, book plates, any kind of notations, title page, copyright page, if it's available. Sometimes I'll take a picture of the table of contents, but not usually. Random sampling of pages. If there are illustrations, I always want to try to capture at least one illustration, and that is kind of the flow for me on the photos. Let me see. Very busy in the chat here, so let's get back in here. Garage sale lets you choose if an item automatically renews or not. So there you go. If you want to go in and manually renew, maybe you want to make a change to the listing, you want to update the price, you could do that and then make that change. So that is something that would work really well in your workflow if you want to reevaluate your listings every 30 days. Bird Knows Best didn't see media mail specifically in those changes. Media mail is usually a separate announcement. So they've got whatever it is, they've got two classes of mail. I forget what exactly they're called. One is competitive and one is market dominant. And the competitive one is like the first class, the ground advantage and that sort of stuff. And the market dominant are things like periodical rate, media mail, and so on. They usually announce those separately. Historically, they have announced the media mail increases first, and I haven't seen one of those yet. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, usually there's two separate announcements. So knock wood, they skip us. Mel Flips, it says the main reason I use AutoPosher is because I sell on Poshmark and that platform is so high maintenance with shares and follow requirements. Absolutely. May change next year, she adds. Dendecor, what would you say your hottest book subject matter is right now? It varies. I do really well with old religious books and kind of old science books. I sold a book last night, an old metallurgy textbook for like $40. Those always do real well. Anything vintage seems to, again, media can be a slow seller. It's long tail. As I said earlier, I've got stuff I've had for multiple years that I probably sell something out of those collections every day. It's one of the reasons I have 11,000 plus listings. For me, it's a numbers game. The more stuff I have, the more at-bats I'm getting, the better opportunity I have potentially to sell something. But I'll sell just all kinds of stuff. Like today, there was a religious book. There was that metallurgy book. There were a couple pieces of fiction. There was a book about isometrics, physical workouts. So really, really random. 22 listings sold from the time I shipped yesterday to the time I shipped this morning across a range of genres and formats. Paperback, hardcover. There isn't one. I don't really target one specific niche. When I'm out shopping, sourcing, I'm always looking for those old religious ones and the old textbooks and that sort of stuff because I know they do well and command pretty good value. But I just drove essentially to Cleveland last weekend to buy a huge lot of science fiction books because I know they're not high value. They're going to be $8-10 a piece probably, but I could get them super cheap. So that's what I did. Miss Lachey says to Mel, don't use a software program. I do end, sell similar, generally 8 to 12 months. I do it sooner in certain circumstances, and I do evaluate and revise prices more regularly. Playroom says November has been good so far. Mine has been as well. I had one day that was not particularly good, but I'm on track to beat last November so far, a little more than halfway through the month. Operating on eBay says, what's the lowest price that you consider when you're deciding between listing and donating? Right now, $4.99 plus shipping, depending on what my cost of goods sold is kind of the minimum I will list for. And those are generally going to be books that I got in like big lots. So the 1,800 book lot that I just did, I paid 50 cents a piece for all of those. So even at $4.99 plus shipping, I'm going to make some pretty good money on that even after fees. Not great. You're not getting rich, but if you sell 8 or 10 of those a day, it's not too hateful. So again, because the cost of goods sold is so low, that's kind of my number. And that's kind of my business model. I'm look at a collection and I'll buy the whole thing. And there'll be a few that are in that, $4 to $6.99 range. And then there'll also be some, I listed one the other day for $99.99 from that same lot. That's a 50-cent cost of goods sold. And the hope, of course, is that on balance, that all works out. Anything that you see, that I see that's selling for, $7 free shipping, that's a 2 or 3 pound book, I generally am not going to list. Right now, I'm either going to try that on Whatnot at a $1 start just to see if I get some traction with that book. Again, if I'm into it for 50 cents, even on Whatnot with the fees, I'm going to make I'll eke out just a tiny bit of profit. And I'll move some inventory and generate some cash flow. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Previously, like I said, I might make lots, 2, 3, 4, 5 of a particular type of book together. Or if it's something like I had a couple from that lot that were just not in great condition and they were super cheap, those are just going straight to donate. So Mel flips it. Mel says, Miss Lachey, it saves me so much time. It's 4 platforms and it may add Etsy, I'm hoping. So that would be good. She asked if I've ever done Pango books. I've sold a few on there. I have not. I kind of watched Katie Reed's experience and she's gone back and forth with using Pango books. It seems to me, just in looking at it, that it is, number one, there's not a ton of traffic over there. And it seems to be a lot of low dollar volume stuff that's selling there. I'm already doing that on Mercari and now on Whatnot. So adding another platform like Pango, and again, with it not being on list perfectly, it doesn't fit easily into my current workflow. So that's why I've chosen not to do it. It is on my radar. If that's one that ever showed up on list perfectly, it would absolutely make sense to do, because you just get them in front of more eyeballs. And if you make a couple of sales a week over there, it would be great. To do that manually, to make that level of sales, I couldn't justify. So, and again, those are all personal business decisions. For me, the juice isn't worth the squeeze again on that, but for other people, it might absolutely be somewhere they want to sell. Christine Talona says, has anyone had recent returns with buyers, part of eBay's trusted buyer program? I have had 2. eBay sends refunds to those buyers as soon as the label is scanned. We talked about that program. Gosh, they haven't really formally introduced it. It's just kind of quietly been a thing. A couple of months ago, you're the first person that I've seen that has actually had one of those happen to them. I'm curious. I've not had any. I haven't had a return in months now. I'd be curious. Are they taking that money out of your account right away when they do that refund? If I remember correctly, that was the process. And then if you have an issue with the item that was sent back to you, you can appeal to eBay for an adjustment, if I remember correctly. Let me know in the chat if I've got that correct. Operating on eBay says, that's helpful. I have some books with no printing on front and wondered what my main photo should be. the spine, or in some cases, that one was pretty borderline because it was pretty faded. Sometimes I'll take a picture of the actual title page of the book, particularly like a lot of books from the 1800s where the covers are really, really rough and you just can't make anything out. The title page is kind of my third option for the main photo for a book like that. Excuse me. Christine says, once you receive the item, you can deduct for damage, wrong item, etc., but I've not been able to deduct original shipping. Interesting. So they're doing a full refund, whether you want to or not. They're refunding shipping. Interesting. I generally refund shipping anyway, so I would not be particularly bothered by that. But yeah, I can see where that would be a problem. I feel like you should have the option, whether, because you paid that, regardless of whether the customer decides to keep the book or not, you paid for the shipping. You paid for it out of the proceeds of the sale, whether they paid shipping or whether it was baked into the price, but you should be able to make a decision whether or not you want to refund that as a seller. And if they're removing that as an option, I can see where people would definitely have a problem with that. Miss Lachey says, I've heard good things about Autoposher. May give it a try if I add another platform. Consignment Ware says, don't you bother to flip through the pages to examine it for wear? Kind of in that process, my experience, again, I've been doing this for now 5 years, just kind of going through and taking photos of those pages, you can pretty quickly tell what the overall condition of the book is. I can recall one instance. I've sold 25,000 books over the last 5 years. I had one instance where I received a message from a buyer that there were pages missing from the book. So 1 out of 25,000, I'll take those odds. And I just gave the guy a refund. Said, keep the book or discard it at your discretion. That's my bad. We missed it, and get on to the next. I typically might fan through if I didn't see any illustrations or any writing just to make sure. But in a case like that, again, it's a $7 or $8 book. My process for a $100 book might look a little different. But for a book like that, that to me, my experience tells me that that is sufficient for what I'm trying to accomplish. Miss Lachey, again, everybody, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you're not. We do these lives pretty much every Wednesday, and then I do a main kind of reselling news and what sold podcast that comes out generally on Sunday for YouTube members, and then Monday morning for everyone else. So if there's blemishes on the inside covers or pages, you take photos. If not, you don't. That's correct. If I see, and a lot of times you can tell, like from the condition of the outside of the book, that there's probably going to be problems on the inside of the book as well. And then I'll go looking for writing, notations, stains, again, the tanning and the foxing that we talk about. Is there a book plate? Is there an inscription? I'm always going to look at those first few pages because that's typically where you'll see a lot of stuff. Even where kids have scribbled in a book is on the inside of the front board, the front end paper, the half title page, the title page, copyright page. If those all look pretty good, the odds are that the book is pretty consistent like that. Again, there's always going to be exceptions. My experience is it's 1 out of 25K, so it's not, for me, been a significant issue. If my strike rate was a lot worse than that, I'd probably be a little more diligent in how I go through them. But I've just found that you can get a pretty good idea at first blush. The spine is cracking, the cover's got a lot of stains on it. You might expect that there will also be issues inside, and then you can be a little more diligent in what you're looking for. But yes, I'd absolutely take pictures if I see a stain or excessive foxing or notations. If I find notations in one place in a book, I will kind of fan through looking for more, because a lot of times there might only be 1 or 2, and a lot of times there might be notations throughout. And then that's something I will take multiple photos of and also disclose in the item description. I'll say, hey, pencil notations throughout as shown. And then again, they've got 2 or 3 photos of examples of what exactly I'm talking about. Consignment Wear says, flip through all the pages of every book to inspect for wear, such as tanning, tears, creases, writing, staining, missing paper, loose pages, and so on. Yeah, again, we're trading where we're investing our time. So you're doing a little more thorough inspection, where my experience tells me that I can tell pretty quickly from a book whether it needs that level of inspection or not. You think I'm spending too much time with the photos and the listing flow. So again, it's just a difference in how we've elected to do our business. I'm assuming both of us are quite successful. I know my business is fantastic. So, and I assume yours is the same. And you, again, you have found a process that works for you, and I have found one that works for me. And these discussions are helpful because all of the other people who haven't yet landed on a process get these different examples of, here's a person who is doing a really thorough inspection of every book, and here's a person who's listing 30, 40, 50 books a day and is doing maybe a little more casual inspection of most of those books. And then they can decide, okay, I've seen this and I've seen that, which of those, or maybe it's somewhere in the middle, which one works best for my business. So I absolutely appreciate all of the comments you've put in the chat about how you do that, so that people can see, as I always say, there's more than one way to do this, and then you can craft your own business to the one that suits you best and to what your experiences are. People like me that are not having these glitches with listings disappearing have a very different workflow than people who have gotten burned with that. To go back to shipping, it's one of the things early sellers struggle with shipping, is they're not diligent about measuring and weighing things. And you get hit one time for a big overage charge on a shipping, and suddenly it changes your business policy of how diligent you are doing your process. So again, absolutely appreciate the feedback. Christine says, you're acting like a petty creature who seeks to aggrandize herself by feasting on the dignity of others. I'm not, that's harsh. Like I said, I appreciate that there are people who do things differently and have different experiences, and that are willing to share those with the audience that comes here to see kind of what I'm doing, because I don't profess to be the best bookseller on the planet. I don't have the best process. I don't have the best sales. None of that. I'm just one guy in my basement sharing this on this platform, how I do things, and through videos like this, how other people are doing it, the software programs that they're using, whatever it was, Consignment Ware's mentioned, the garage sale software, whatever it is. I've never heard of that until you mentioned it today. So this is all learning process, and I appreciate everybody's comments and sharing. Again, in Garage Sale, I've already created a series of templates based on shipping scenarios. So all I do is duplicate one for a new listing. No need to edit the shipping details, but you're still having to select that profile. So you're still doing that process, just in a slightly different way. And selling online for 24 years, additional experience with a large wholesaler and 2 bulk goods operations. Yeah, and I was in retail management for 30 years. I owned a record store for a dozen years. Everybody has different experiences that they bring to the table. Den Decor Depot says, done well with automotive manuals and estimating books. I have a pile of auto ephemera from the 60s through the 90s that I'm working through. I've done really well also with old auto manuals, be they like the Chilton Haynes manuals or actual OEM, like GM. I sold one not too long ago for a Chevy Citation, of all things. So yeah, those old auto manuals can be super good. And again, you can usually pick them up really cheap. Operating on eBay says, my current cost of goods sold is 0 while I'm decluttering. Perfect. You can be a lot more flexible with a 0 cost of goods sold, or stuff from your own, like Katie Reeds does her like free book pickups. So she's got a ton of stuff that is 0 cost of goods sold, and your pricing strategy on those types of things can be a lot more aggressive than someone who is going to estate sales and paying maybe $2, $3, $4 for that same item. It changes the math and allows you to be, then you have the option. You can be super competitive. You can say, hey, the lowest price comp on this book that I have for nothing is $9. I'm going to sell mine for $7 and just undercut the market. Or you can say, I'm going to sell it for the same price. I'm going to sell it for $9 and I'm going to make an extra $2. That's the flexibility that you get by being really good on the buy side. And again, it's one of the reasons I do these big bulk buys. I'll look at the collection, the library of a sale and say, you know what, there's a good percentage of stuff here that's going to be $15, $18, $20, $25 or more. I'm willing to take on the stuff that may not be that valuable to get those goods and do it at a super low price rather than maybe spending hours going through all those books to just cherry pick out the ones I really want and end up paying the same price. For instance, the 1,800 book purchase that I just did, that's exactly what I told the estate seller. I said, there are probably half of these books that I would really want. And I'm willing to give you, let's call it $2 a book for those. The other half of the books, I probably really don't want, and I'm not willing to give you anything for those. So net, I'd be willing to give you 50 cents a book to leave myself a little negotiating room if she wanted to come back and say, how about $1? She agreed with that because again, I'm providing a service. I'm removing all those books. I'm packing them up. I'm hauling them away. I'm dealing with them individually or in bulk, whatever. They don't have to mess with it. They don't have to try to price them. They don't have to try to research them. So there is a value that you can present to estate companies by doing that. And then you can get all these books super cheap. And you have instances where I've talked about this before. I have several estate sellers who have called me and said, we've got 500 books left from this sale. If you'll come pack them up, you can just have them. And again, that goes back to your zero cost of goods sold. You do donate books for the tax deduction. If you do not qualify, then you can always sell the books in bulk to someone as a taxable deduction. That's getting into a lot of accounting there. It depends on how you record your cost of goods sold. If you're recording that as an expense at the time you purchase the books, then the donation would be a tax write-off. If you are recording them as an asset on your books, those are treated differently. So yes, in the end, it becomes tax deductible because you're removing them one way or another from your inventory, but the actual mechanics of it can vary depending on your accounting procedure. And I'm not a CPA, so I don't want to get too deep down that rabbit hole. But yes, items that are donated, you should be able to write off in some way against your cost of goods sold. I will leave it there. Talk to your particular CPA about what the correct way to do that is for your business, depending on how you record the cost of those books initially. Ms. Lachey says, I've had 2 eBay paid pre-refunds. Interesting. What categories were they in? I'm just curious where we're seeing a lot of that. Christine says they use eBay funds for the immediate payment. Once returned and you process the return, then eBay takes the funds from you. Perfect. So that, I'm all good with that. They're paying for that upfront on their dime. And then once you acknowledge that the return was in good condition or whatever, then you get hit for the fee. That's perfect. That's how it should be. Now we only got to work out the shipping piece of it. Find Amazon is better for high-end books such as leather-bound Easton and Franklin. Also, local history books and privately printed books do well as they were printed in very limited quantities. I just sold one today, a cookbook from a local department store that has been out of business for probably a dozen years. I picked it up at an estate sale for $1 and sold it for like $22 or $23 on eBay. Again, I've got someone that I've talked to on this show that it does Whatnot shows selling Easton Press and Franklin books on Whatnot. And I would agree. I think there's probably more value to be gained from those books elsewhere. Maybe eBay, maybe Amazon, maybe even Etsy for people who are really into vintage things. And it becomes a question of how do you want to, the guy who's selling them on Whatnot, he's buying, like he mentioned in the live we did a few weeks ago, he bought 40 pallets of books. So he's trying to turn through some inventory rather than maximize every individual item, where someone who buys differently, selling on Amazon for a max markup, again, makes more sense. So again, not to belabor the point, it goes back to different business models creating different results and giving you a ton of options in how you want to conduct your business. Ms. Lachey says, once items were received back, I followed the normal process. I do buyer paid shipping both ways, so only the item price was refunded unless I missed it. So there you go. Den Decor says, good chatting again. Take care. It's time to sell. Thank you. I appreciate it. We are at the hour and 20-minute mark, so I'm a little over my number here. So Consignment Ware says, people often store items inside books such as flowers from funerals, notes, tickets, and so forth, which are typically made of low quality paper that tans and then stains the pages. Absolutely. Seen that all the time. People will cut out like a newspaper clipping. I had one the other day where they had cut out, it was a local author, they had cut out a newspaper clipping of like an interview, an article about the author and the publication of the book, and put it in the book. And when you take that out, there is a tanned impression of where that was in the book. If you find stuff in the book, obviously you want to try to remove those things. You don't want to send a book with old pressed flowers and whatnot in it. But those usually will leave a mark. And again, I will usually try to take a picture of that if and when I find it. Well, Flips, it says, if I look at the edges, I can tell, excuse me, if there's a folded page or tear easily. Generally, that is the case. Sometimes you get fooled. I had one the other day where a series of pages had been improperly cut at the printer, and it looked like they had been folded and crimped, but in actuality what it was there was overhang of the paper where that bundle of pages had not gotten cut completely by the printer. So, but again, usually it's a pretty visible, pretty obvious thing that you would want to look for. Have you sold any books with rodent damage? Mice will actually eat the edges of hardcover bindings. Yes, I've sold books that have obviously had insect damage. Again, it's a case of disclosing it and taking the photos and pricing it appropriately. I've not had to deal, fortunately, with any rodent damage on any of my books. You get the occasional musty basement. You'll get some that have, some mildewy, musty smell to them. And again, that's something that I disclose if I detect it. I've not had any rodent damage, but again, it is something that usually would be pretty obvious and absolutely be something you would want to take photos of. Carson Price, when it comes to reselling, do you think it's best to buy at low cost or for me to grow into Negro? I'm not sure what you're saying there. As Operani said, she's not buying anything right now. My suggestion to start is look at the things you have that you currently own that you would put in a garage sale and use those kind of as starters until you learn kind of the process, how to calculate shipping, how to do research for pricing on comps, how to ship items, what kind of materials you need to ship, and those sorts of things, so that you can grow into it at a little more gradual pace without a big investment up front in inventory. It also allows you to research the categories that you're maybe interested in selling, the categories that are profitable to sell in, things that you maybe just absolutely do not want to mess with. I used to sell records quite a bit. I personally found that record buyers are a little more finicky than I really want to mess with, so I stopped buying records. So those are the kind of things that you can learn by starting fairly slow. Then once you've kind of landed on some categories that you're interested in, hit some garage sales, hit some estate sales, look for individual items in those categories that you really want to focus on. And again, learn a category or two kind of at a time. Don't try to do everything, because you'll end up with a bunch of potentially bad buys. And never hesitate to try to negotiate a better price. If you're out on an estate sale and they've got everything, I'll go into a sale and they've got books marked, $3, $4 a piece. I may create a pile of 25 or 30 and say, hey, I know you've got them priced, whatever, $4. I'm buying 30 of them. Can you work with me on the price? And most sellers, again, they're just there to sell stuff. They're not trying to collect it. They don't want to deal with it afterwards. Most of them will do that. So don't be afraid to ask for a better price. Lord knows your customers are going to do that. You're going to get all kinds of crazy offers, regardless of the site you sell on, to try to get a little bit better price. So don't hesitate to do that yourself when you're outsourcing. Hopefully that helps. Consignment Wares says, good idea to find an image on Google image search that names the various parts of the book so you can consistently refer to the parts of the books as end papers, front papers, and so on. I did a whole episode on book terminology probably 6 months ago. There are terms that I felt like and still feel like maybe are overly esoteric within the book buyer and seller world, that the average buyer on eBay looking at a $12 to $15 book is not going to know that term. So on those types of books, I will tend to be a little cautious about how deep into the jargon I will get. It is good to know what those things are so that you can properly identify them in the event that you need to. Matching those things up again with photos in your listing is super important. So if you say has a name written on the front end paper and you have a buyer who doesn't understand what a front end paper is, you then have a photo of that they can look at and say, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about there. So yes, finding those resources. Abe Books has, I think, 2 separate kind of blog posts about book terminology and book types, where you can go in and it's just like a glossary of book terms and you can kind of look at that. Or if you're interested, you can go into my catalog of these live episodes and go back. Like I said, it was probably about 6 months ago. I did a live show talking about all of those terms using the Abe Books webpage as a guide and kind of showing this is what foxing looks like, this is what tanning looks like, this is a front end paper, and so on. Bird Knows Best just got the annual email from Amazon. I did talk about that. They're not increasing fees. We'll be talking about that in depth on Monday's show. Lindy Moo, Ryan feasting on others' dignity. The best items I found inside books was a Civil War discharge document and a ticket for the opening day of the Golden Gate Bridge, which was foot traffic only. That's cool. I've found a lot of just like random stuff. I think I had one in my show a couple of weeks ago where someone had used a pamphlet from it was a map of walking trails around a golf course at a particular community. Just a random thing stuck in there. I listed it for like $12.99 on eBay and sold it within a couple of days. So I've never found anything super valuable. I found a $10 bill once. And you find odds and ends, ticket stubs, and, kind of just various paper ephemera that are opportunities to sell as well. Operating on eBay says, as always, learn some new information. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. JRKR says, always negotiate. Absolutely. Don't be afraid to tell people what you do. You'll be surprised how many people will just give you stuff if they find out that's what you're doing to try to make a living, or even as a side hustle. So some sellers are really hesitant to talk about what they do, especially when they're like out at sales or whatever. I'm not that guy. You walk up with 40 or 50 books, that usually clues them in that there's something more going on. And if they ask, I will absolutely tell them, yes, I sell books online. I've talked about a couple times, I was at a sale where I had a stack of books and the actual estate seller said, why are you buying these? Nobody buys books anymore. And I said, well, I sell books online full time for a living. I'm doing quite well. So these are the books I want to buy for that business. Again, everybody's experience and knowledge base is very different. An estate seller, like I said, they don't have the time or the wherewithal to individually research 3, 4, 5, 1,800 books, where someone like me or you who does this as a job or as a side hustle, that's what we do. And so those expertise levels and those interest levels are very different, and you approach that business in a very different way. So thank you. Absolutely. Always, always, always negotiate. With that, we're at about 90 minutes, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you so much, as always, for everybody who came out today. I always appreciate, again, the good back and forth and the discussion and the kind of the disclosure of different ways that different people run their businesses, so that you, as a new or even as a seasoned seller, can make a decision about things that you've learned, things that you've seen, and how you want to run your business as you best see fit for your particular situation. So again, appreciate the good back and forth. If you are not currently a subscriber to the channel or a member, those are things that are available. We'd love to have you on board with the rest of the Galaxian family. Until next time, my friends, it's time to sell. Thanks, guys.